Hello friends, Jef V here from Squadron. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more about dioramas, diorama bases and painting them. You know, we all are very happy whenever we finish our project and we have either a tank or an airplane, it's finished, but then what do you do with it? Either you put it in a showcase or you put it on a shelf. But when you put your model, especially in this case an airplane model, when you put it on a diorama, it brings it so much more to life. So that's why Squadron recently released the TDD, which is the True Detail Displays, or better known as Moments in Time. It's a little series of very detailed display bases. The topography of these display bases is so well detailed, and you can tell the one I'm holding here, there is a lot of detail embedded already. But it's so well detailed that it's very easy to paint and very easy to bring those details out. We also, in this chapter, we're also going to paint these things, and I'm going to guide you through how to do it because it's very, very easy. First of all, like I showed you before, we have the World War I kind of airfield. In this case, it also comes with a little bag of resin, as you can tell, with some extra detail. As you can see, there's a rudder in there, there's a wheel, a World War I wheel, and a couple fence posts. We have these in three sizes. This one is the 32nd scale. We also have something similar in 48 and 72nd scale. The other style we're doing right now, it's the first of our 6 releases, is the Marston Mat. It's the PSP plating. You can use these for World War II, Korea, even Vietnam. In these Marston mats, as you can see here, we have 2 scales, the 48 scale and the 32nd scale. In the 48 scale, we have actually 2 sizes. One is like this, the large one, where you can put like a medium bomber on there. The other one is a little bit like a cutout, a little bit smaller, and that's good enough for a fighter. So for now, we have about 6 items, but as we go along every month, we will add 1 or 2, and it's going to be armor, there's going to be, let's say, a field or a street section, or even a Russian war zone or European war zone, desert. We're also going to do flight decks, the US World War II or modern, Japanese. The list is long. So for now, let's stick with this one and let's start painting. So as I mentioned before, you can see there's a lot of detail here already embedded. You might think, well, maybe that's going to be a little bit difficult to paint or all that, but don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. As we go along, I will show you. It's actually quite fun and it's quite easy, and you will have almost immediate result. But first, we need to talk about airbrushing it, because 90% of the base here is going to be airbrush. The rest is all going to be a little bit like weathering techniques and some oils we're going to use. But for now, we need to do a base coat, and then we're going to highlight some areas, like for instance the middle here, and then the 2 sides. It also comes with a little bag of period items, like for instance, we got a World War I wheel of an airplane. We got a couple fence posts here that we're going to mount after we're done painting. And there's another one here, it's a World War I rudder. We can nonchalantly put that against a rock there. So these are just a couple items that will even bring it more alive. But let's start with the beginning and let's paint it. Also, to make it a little bit easier on you, Squadron released a set, the airfield display set. It's a 4-color set, and this is only the 4 colors you basically need to do the base, to cover it with the airbrush and to paint it. All the other stuff is just some oils and some washes. To get the main base color on there and to get some shadowing in there, this is the paint set you use. Let's start with covering everything with a dark brown base coat. If you have some dark brown or whatever dark coat laying around, that's fine too. Like I said, like I mentioned in the beginning, this is just to make it a little bit more easy on you. You don't have to look for colors. We already have it pre-packed. But again, if you have a dark brown color somewhere, that will work too. Oh, let's shake it first. Okay. You can put quite some, I would even say that almost empty half the bottle in there, because you have a lot of grounds to cover. And then put a little bit of airbrush thinner in there, not too much, because you really want to apply a decent coat in there. Put my cap on there so I won't spill. And then you just spray it. Make sure you tilt it in several directions, so because there's a lot of, as you can tell, there's a lot of undercuts, there's a lot of cavities that you might miss. If you have a couple spots that shine through, that's fine, that will all eventually work out. Just make sure that you cover these two sides especially. In the middle there's going to be some color nuances anyway. You don't really have to put like a thick coat in there. Just stay on the side and just cover basically the middle with a light coat. Now, as you can tell here, I oversprayed the mat here. Now, of course, I'm doing this for demonstration purposes, but it would be smart if you just use a piece of cardboard, like here, like the underlaying here, just a piece of stock cardboard that we have laying around. Don't panic, because you can easily clean this off with a airbrush thinner. So once I'm done putting the base coat here, I'll wipe it clean. Yeah, once it starts drying, double check, like for instance here, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can, I think you can. It's a little like an undercut there, and it's not completely covered. Once it's dry, you can see the spots where you missed it, and then you can go over it again. Okay, so this is it as far as it for the brown. Especially with this base, we have some extra resin pieces we have to clean up and paint. So when I come back in actually hand painting and weathering the base, we'll tackle these again, and then we'll paint them accordingly and put them in their position. But for now, as far as the brown is done, we're okay, I guess. I think I got everything covered. Now we're just gonna start with the middle here. As you can tell here, it's still wet, but it will dry. We don't have to touch it right now. We can start with the middle here and give it a couple coats. The first color we're going to spray in here to get some shadowing and then to get some color nuances is sand yellow. It's a little darker than actually dark yellow. As you can tell here, this is the sand yellow and this is the dark yellow. But this is lighter than that. I don't know why they did it, but that's the name they gave it. So first of all, we're going to apply a coat, a little darker coat, and eventually we'll highlight it with this one. Okay, let's shake the bottle here. It's always good to have these. I mentioned that in previous videos. Or it's always good when you go to a fast food restaurant. They always have them at the counter or close. I always take a couple, and they're very, very easy to use, and once you're done with it, you just throw them away. You don't have to put as much in there because you're just gonna touch the surface a little. Well, as you can tell, it's always wise to put the cap back on there. Things happen to me too, you know, but that's okay, that will all be covered anyway. So let's start gently and see what we have. And again, don't do it all at once, just gently, just lightly apply a coat. All you want to achieve is some contrast. See, as you can tell, we already are making headway. You can already see that there's going to be contrast, and again the finishing of it is going to be very, very straightforward. We're going to do a second coat here in the middle with dark yellow, which is, as a matter of fact, which is lighter. Need to put some more. Alright, now we'll start in the middle. And you can overshoot the sides of the, you don't necessarily have to stay within the limitations here or within the line. You can easily overshoot a little. And then we're going to make one more pass and try to stay in the middle as much as we can. Because it's very important to bring the color nuances, bring the transition. Eventually, once we start putting a wash, it will all blend together. I'm going to add a little bit more on this side there, just spray it a little bit. And that should be it for as far all the planking. The rest is going to be all weathering. The last color we apply is an olive drab. Try to do it all around the rocks here, around the wood, just to give you a little bit like a grassy look. But again, eventually we're going to do some dry brushing and some oil washes. But just to give it a little bit of a color and to blend it in with the rest, we're going to use the olive drab. You don't need all that much, just a little tiny bit. A little bit of thinner in there. Don't be afraid when you touch the rock or something or the wood, because that's going to be painted by themselves anyway at a later stage. And as you can tell, you can already see the color nuances over there. Let's do the other side. So as far as airbrushing is concerned, that's it. We're going to let it dry for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to apply some Humbrol paint for dry brushing. And I'm going to start with this brown. It's a Humbrol flat 29, and we got some green here that we can mix. It's the Mat 150. This is what I have laying around here, but you can easily use either Vallejo or another color to dry brush these. But I like to use Humbrol for dry brushing, because Humbrol, although it's an enamel, it's a little thicker paint. It leaves a little bit more structure, and that's what you need as far to represent dirt. It just works better for me. Humbrol 29, it's basically a dark earth, and that always worked for me if I have to dry brush some diorama items. It has very good structure, very good color, and it always blends in. Whenever I start adding my washes, my oils, it's the best base coat as far as dry brushing that is available to me. So the other color I use is an olive drab. Again, this is Mat 150 from Humbrol, but you can use other mediums. But for this, since at Humbrol, if I have to dry brush some grass or try to simulate some grass, this has a lot deeper color to it. It brings more depth into the equation. I'll show you as we go along. You will understand what I'm trying to explain here. For this purpose, I just use, this is a cat tongue in modern hair from Da Vinci. You can find those online, and I like to use a new one. So with dry brushing, you're basically don't mix the paint. You just go to the bottom and just scoop out a thick blob. Actually, I'm going to show you here, and then I'm going to put it on the side, but this is basically what I do. Dip your brush in there and then wipe it off a little bit. Don't wipe too much off, because the structure is pretty rough. So and then you cover all the dirt. You start covering all the dirt around it. You don't have to be thorough, just try to keep some shade here, try to keep some darker, just feather it out. Don't worry if you touch something here, because eventually those trucks are going to be painted separately. Also the propeller and the wooden planks, the radiator here. Now the reason I'm doing this so fast is once the dry brushing is done, I can let it dry for 24 hours before I add the washes on there. It always needs at least the time to harden the paint. But working with Vallejo as an acrylic, and then working with Humbrol as an enamel, those two, they don't really interfere much with each other. No matter what you do, if you apply enamel first and then you try to work it with acrylic, it doesn't really mess it up. If you would do enamel on enamel, you would have a problem. The same thing with if you use acrylic either to dry brush or to airbrush, you might run into a problem. But if you combine the two mediums, it's pretty solid. So don't worry about breaking through the paint. And you can already see we got like nice little color nuances here. You can see where the dirt is, where the grass is simulated. It doesn't take much. You can do it here also, because in the middle of the landing strip here there is some simulated dirt, And you want to emphasize that. Same thing at the end here. Okay, let's do the other side here. You scoop out a little bit more of the Humbrol. Don't be afraid to come out of the dirt, let's say, and move on to the planks, because that only creates more of the fading and blending. And together with the wash we apply 24 hours later, it all will come together. As you can see, I'm pretty rough in applying that paint. I think that's already good enough for the earth color. Well, now I'm going to do the last color. As you might notice, we had to reposition the camera because we had to duct tape everything in place because it was a little bit shifting. So, but everything is secured and safe, and thank God for duct tape. So we'll continue our quest. Okay, again, this is Humbrol. It's an olive drab color, and I'm going to apply just a little to simulate some grassy areas here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to scoop out some thick. Now the things that I use is just cardstock. I have some stuff laying around, so I cut these pieces. You can do it on plastic sheet too, but then it becomes expensive. So if you have some card, like with a glossy side on one, it doesn't have to be white, it can be anything. As long as there is a glossy side on there, use that, and when you're done, you just throw it away. It doesn't cost anything, and it's very handy. Alright. So now gently, I'm just going to accentuate some of the front here where there's grass, or supposed to be grass. Now even on this base, when you really look very closely, you can see grass straws on there. So there is simulated grass on there. You just have to touch it up and highlight it. You can also, and I think Andy did it off Handy Headquarters in his video, he sprinkled some grass on it, some static grass. You can do that too. Sky is the limit, but I just wanted to show you that without any extra except the paint, you can paint this really realistic. And again, don't worry if you touch anything, because I'm gonna have to paint these in a light color, let it dry, and then I'm gonna, tomorrow with oil paint, we're gonna simulate the wood, or let's say 24 hours later when everything is dry. And okay, this is good for this side. Now let's do the other side, same way. So as far as the green, I don't think it needs anything extra. I think we covered it. We don't want to overdo it. So what I'm going to do now is to highlight everything, like the planks here, the propeller. We got more planks here. We got like a beam. So I'm going to paint that in dark yellow. Once I paint it in dark yellow, it's going to look awful. Again, all it is just a base coat that needs to dry before I can apply my oils. So we have some leftover here. Or maybe I can use this here. Maybe I'll use this. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to have a light coat, so tomorrow when I apply my oil, raw umber or burnt sienna, it will get the real wood effect. I'm going to do the planks here. Doesn't have to be perfect. It will all come together when we start weathering. On this side, do the same. Got the propeller here. Here you have to a little bit more pay attention. It all paints so easy. Okay, now we have to do last plank here. And there you go. Last thing I'm going to do for now, before we let it completely dry out, is to highlight the rocks. I'm not advising this, but I like to use the back of my tweezers here to go in there and to open it up. Again, you should not do this at home. It's better than a chainsaw or whatever. Anyway, so same thing. We apply a little bit of the bottom of the paint where the thick part is, And now here I would advise you to be a little bit more careful, because like I said, it's a little bit more contrasty. So you just very gently stroke the rocks. By doing it that way, you have a little bit more control. I'm going to do that just to bring a little bit more contrast into the equation. I would like to highlight them a little bit in gray, a light gray, a stone gray. Again, once we apply it, it starts a little off because it looks too gray, it looks too contrasty for what we already painted so far. But again, tomorrow with the raw umber, with all the black oils, the burnt sienna, the other washes we're going to use, it all will blend in. But for now, I need to have, again, a good base coat or a good platform to work with, which is a lighter color. I'm not going to overdo it. And with the rocks, you start with the top and you highlight it and then gently work your way to the bottom. Even if the other color comes a little bit in, even if the brown mixes in there, that's actually work to your advantage. You want to get this nature stone together with the oils for weathering. It will all really start to look realistic. And the good thing is, once you do everything and you do the first coat, then go over it and only the top, just the top with new paint, with fresh paint, which is a lot lighter, and just stroke the top, and then it will highlight all the ridges and the edges. And you want that. You want to get the ones that expose to the sun more, the ones that people step on, sit on, they always look a little bit lighter than the ones closer to the bottom that has a lot of dirt or mud. But the top is always lighter. By doing this extra layer on top very gently, you really get the color differences and the nuances, and you're almost there. The only thing you need to do is some oils around it and it will all blend in. Looks fairly realistic. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. It starts to look really, really realistic. Okay, now let's do the other side. And don't forget the small rocks here. Just barely touch them, just to give it a little bit of contrast. Same thing, last layer we put on there, you only stay on the ridges, on the sharp edges, and you work your way down. Well, that should suffice. As you can see, there's a lot of like dead wood here and a little bit here. I'm really quickly gonna put some more of the dark earth on there. I'm going to bring that out a little bit. Well, so far we're fine. I mean, we got everything covered that we need to cover. Now we need to let it dry. Also, I mentioned this earlier. I'm going to prepare these. I don't think it's a big deal. I'm just going to airbrush these here in a lighter color. The same thing with the wheel. I'm just going to make it like a light gray, and then eventually we can paint the tire black. But for now, I'm not going to do this. This is just something that we'll worry about when we're finishing this up. So far, it's been pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Again, like I said, it's no big deal. Everything has to dry now, and tomorrow, whenever we put the washes on there, it will all flow together, and you will really, really be surprised how nice this is going to look. And once you put your airplane on there, it's going to look just gorgeous. Now you might think maybe I can do this myself and all that, and you can. I mean, you can make these bases, because I made these all the planks you see. I did these with balsa wood. There is some stuff from like a propeller from a scrap kit. There's some rocks that I put there. There is some pumice that I used. But when you think about it, once you have to buy everything, you end up with a lot more, because balsa wood is pretty expensive. I mean, for a little strip you pay easily $2 or $1. It's quite an expense, and then there's also the work, there is also the mess, because to make these, it's a little bit of a mess you're making. So I would, if I could find something that is already done and as detailed as this, because again, I don't know if it shows up on the screen, but the detail is absolutely exquisite. You can even see the individual grass blades or grass flock. You can see the gravel, you can see the pebbles, you see even the wood grain, it's all there. So it's a small price to pay just to avoid all the nuisance of making it yourself. and the result is just stunning. We will make more as we go. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, there will be some bases for everybody, either if you're in armor or in the Navy or in airplane stuff, that there will be enough bases that cover every area, every battle, every era. Also, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, desert, modern. Keep an eye on it. But for now, we're going to let this dry overnight. It's going to be like a 24 hours, and then we're going to apply some oil washes. Get a couple oils here from Untitled 502, but I'll talk more about that when I come back. We'll go from there. But again, to paint this, if you time-wise, you should be able to do this in a couple hours, and then once you put your airplane on there, you're going to be very satisfied. I'll be back in 24 hours. Alright, we're back. It's been dried for 24 hours now, approximately. As you can tell, I cheated a little. I added the fence posts here. I still need to paint them, but I just cleaned them up a little bit and put them in place. But other than that, it's just the way I left it yesterday. So first of all, since there's going to be a lot of weathering going on and a lot of washes being applied, I'm going to start with the midsection here. For this, I'm going to use oils. The ones I'm using to paint the whole thing is the Untitled 502 oils, and I have the burnt sienna, I have the raw umber, and I have the smoke. These are actually the three oils you use the most in weathering, and you can either mix them up and change the color or change the contrast, but this is what we're going to use for now, and I'm going to do the planking. Again, like I told you yesterday, it's going to be very simple, but the effect is just amazing. I'm going to squirt a little bit of everything on a card here. Dark stuff, and then a little bit of raw umber. Okay, and then we're going to have some odorless thinner, also from Untitled 502. Now, this is not absolutely necessary. I use it because, well, it comes with the product, but you can also use just regular thinner, turpentine, or odorless thinner you'll find. So a normal paint thinner will work with these two since they're enamel or oils. For now, I'm going to go with their thinner. Alright. So what we're going to do, I'm going to make a mix. I'll do it a little bit here in front of the camera, and then later I'll put my card on the side. But what we're going to do is we're going to use a lot of thinner and just make a little liquid here, or try to moisten it as much as we can, and then we're just gonna apply it, just gonna let it soak in there very smoothly. Again, use a lot of thinner, let it all spread out. As you can already tell, you want to create some dark planks, some lighter planks. You want to make at least a little shadow around the leftover dirt that's on there. In some cases you will apply a little bit more. In some of it you can even just use clear thinner, so you have some light spots. It doesn't have to be dark all the time or all the way. The nice thing with oil paints, you can always work with it. As long as you keep it moist, you can do whatever you want with it. Now I used, for this, like I said, I used the odorless paint thinner, but I already had some in a bottle, some old one. So I'm not going to use or contaminate the new bottle, but the best thing is to have a little jar that you can pour some in there and then go from there. But I'm a little lazy here. If you like over here, I made it extra dark. Once it dries up, it will all blend in, and you can have like a section of like dark planks where the plank starts to rot, or at least have some oil spills that eventually water down. So you just have to go by feeling and what you think looks right. A little bit more raw umber here. Also make sure that you keep the room ventilated. Although it says odorless thinner on the bottle, it still smells pretty strong. I also have to remind you, as you can tell here, it might look pretty dark right now, but once it dries up, it will become a little lighter, and of course not as glossy, not as wet. Because of the amount of oils and the amount of thinner we use, once in a while you run into a little spot that it stays glossy, that you can cover maybe with a little bit of flat varnish, and we probably have to do that on the planks here where we're going to use only oils. But the general consensus is here, once you weather something, you do not cover it with a flat coat, because you're going to ruin all the contrast, and you don't want to do that. Once you make it like a dull coat, it's all going to go back to really nothing. All your work that you put in there is all going to be at least 75% eliminated because of the dull coat. So you want to keep it as original as possible. If you have a couple wet spots that you think, it will never dry out, you can add some here and there. You can overspray it or add a little, like a dull coat on certain spots, but in general you cannot do the whole thing. And again, because of the oils, because of the amount of thinner, if it stays glossy, or eventually it will evaporate. It might take a couple of days, it might take a week, it might take even a month, but eventually all the oils and the thinners, everything that could be like a glossy sheen or anything, will evaporate in time. It will dry out and it will become completely flat. This is all done by feeling or by visual. You can work from pictures, but I like to just go by visual. If I think it's too dark, then I add some thinner and water it out. If I think this spot can use a little bit more raw umber, I'll do that. But whatever you're happy with, just paint it. And the more you do of these, this is actually my third one that I'm doing, so it comes like second nature. You already know what the result is going to be, and you just experiment every time. You experiment a little bit further, you'll get more confident. You also might be tempted to use a bigger brush like this, because this is quite an area, but I wouldn't advise that. This is actually a number 6. You might go with a number 8, but I wouldn't go any bigger. You still need to be able to make the streaks and the stripes. Okay, that looks pretty good. That's the result I want. So now I'm going to proceed, but the good thing is at this stage I would put it away for maybe half an hour, so at least let all the thinner evaporate, or mostly. But I can continue real quick here. Let's start with this area here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use the same colors, and I'm just going to put some shadows around every rock that's here, or I'm going to outline the beam, the planks, just to give it contrast and to create some shadows around it. This will also take away most of the dry brushing. Sometimes you make a mistake or there's too much dry brush on there. This is the way to get rid of it, by adding some raw umber or smoke, which is like a black kind of a deal, or a mixture of both. You can really create some nice shadowing. And again, all I do here, is just use raw umber, some smoke, some burnt sienna, and a wet brush. So now we're going to do this side. Here on the end of where basically the runway ends, you can make it a little bit darker, add some more smoke or black with it, so you have a really dark contrast between the wood and the dirt. As you can tell here, I painted this black, or gave it a black wash with Vallejo black. Very heavy tint, and then I just brushed it over there, so at least the gray comes a little through. But eventually we're going to do this some metallizing around here, because this is actually a radiator of a World War I aircraft. So I already gave it a very light coat of very heavily tint black. And once it's dry, we're going to metallize it a little, and then we're going to work with some oils. I had to do that a little bit before we started painting this, because it needs to dry. So once I start weathering it, that the paint won't go off. And once again, don't worry if you get some glossy spots here and there. It will all evaporate, it will all dry up. I think here it's almost already dry. So I think as far as this is concerned, the dirt and the groundwork, I think we're fine. So now what we're going to do is we're going to apply a mix of burnt sienna, oil paint and raw umber, and then we're going to try to simulate the wood. We add it on there, we apply it on here. We'll come back later once it's a little bit dry. We come back and then we'll try to make some wood nerving in there, or wood grain. This is very simple, but it's very rewarding. Do the same here. It's amazing how really well detailed this is. I mean, I'm accentuating the beams and the planks here, and I can see every nerve or blemish that the wood generated and that the resin picked up. So it's very well detailed. Polyurethane resin molding, you do not lose any detail. What you put in there, you pull out. Exactly, it's a true copy of the real thing. I can even see little tiny splinters that came from the balsa wood, and they're still reproduced in the resin. It's a very amazing process. Get like a dry brush, like a brush, an older brush that you have laying around, and that's dry, and then we can streak it. I have a piece of cloth close by. And now we will try to get some grain in there, or at least simulate the grain. And what it basically does is that you just take off some of the oil paint so the bottom color can shine through. And if you take off too much, you can always add some more and do it all over again. You can even use your finger to wipe some off. If these planks stay too shiny, you can, and I'll demonstrate that later on, you can add a little bit of dull coat only on these planks so they become more dull, but also it will give a nice contrast with the rest. They will blend in when you do that. Let's do the other plank here. And you have to twist and turn your base to get into the right angle so you can see the light, and then just try to make it look realistic. Once you're doing it, you will exactly understand what I'm trying to say here. The propeller might take a little bit more of your attention because you want to make sure that you get some nice fluent wood grain in there. It's already good, I think. It's not hard to do, just have to concentrate a little bit better. Just make nice even streaks. I think I got it there. And that's about it. Now we're gonna color these. As you can see, already one broke off. So let me glue that back into place. It might be wise to leave it up there until you really are ready to paint. To paint these, this is very simple. Again, I'm going to go with the Humbrol Flat 29 paint, and we're going to do the same thing like we did yesterday. I'm just going to scoop a little bit from the bottom, just a tiny little bit. You don't need much. Smear it on there. And then all I'm going to do is make a light mixture with some thinner, and I can maybe add a little bit of raw umber to make it a little darker. But I'm making a mixture of that. Just go over it. And you don't really cover the whole thing, you just let the thinner take over. You want to get some really wood kind of a look in there. I don't know if it's visible, but it's not hard to do. And when it dries, around the detail there will form a little bit of darker, so you already get shadow in there and you don't need to do anything else. It looks already realistic. So let's do the other ones same way. I'll probably break these off before I'm done. Alright, that looks good. We're almost there. Now we're going to add some detail. As you can see, we still have the rudder and the wheel. I already took the liberty to pre-paint the wheel. I couldn't restrain myself, so I'll do the back. It's the same thing. All I did was apply dark umber, raw umber, and you just paint the contours around it, then let it dry a little bit, and then later we come back and we blend it. But as you can see, I already did this. We just have to accentuate I'm gonna let it dry for a second, and then later I'll blend it in and make some streaks. The same thing with the rudder. The rudder that's gonna be put here next to the propeller. Now the good thing is, I told you that in the previous section of this, the first section, is that when you use oils or enamel on acrylic, it doesn't really messes each other up, and vice versa. If I would use enamel on enamel, like an enamel thinner on an enamel painting, it will come off. But if I do, let's say in this case, Vallejo color acrylic, and I use the oils, even after a couple hours you can easily work with it, and it doesn't really get through the paint. Of course, if you add too much thinner and you start rubbing too hard, then eventually the paint will break. But if you do it lightly and gently, you can fairly quickly start weathering after you've airbrushed it. Make a little bit of a worn look here. And again, this doesn't have to be all that great of a paint job, because this is just extra stuff you put there. And then we blend it in. Wipe it off. Don't forget to do the back. The back doesn't have to be as prominent, because you won't see it anyway. You can chip it a little. Again, I do this with umber, but you can make some streaks coming down, because it's exposed to the weather elements, and you want to emphasize that. So you might, let's say, put a couple of streaks on there. Again, you have to let your imagination do the work. You can make it as dirty or leave it as clean as you want. Do a little chipping here and there. Now remember, this is canvas, so you can make it a little bit more attractive. There you go. And like I mentioned before, I'm gonna metallize this a little bit, so we can work on that. Not much, but a little bit. For that I got some printer's ink, old printer's ink that I had laying around. It's all dried up, but usually when I stick my brush in there, there's always a little bit that comes off, so let me throw that again. So this is just normal printer's ink that I lifted out of this dry bottle here. And what I usually do, I put some on my finger and then rub it, most of it off, and then I just stroke the piece that I want to get metallized. It works pretty good, and it's also very realistic. It doesn't have to be a perfect job again, because you're going to do some weathering on it. You just have to make sure that it looks like metallic. So this is also very easy to do. Alright, we're almost there, just a little bit more. I told you I already started yesterday on the wheel here. I'm going to blend this in a little bit here around the midsection. That's also the beauty about oil paint. You can put it on there for 5-10 minutes and then come back and then just blend it all the way. It's easy to work with, and the result is stunning. Very realistic. Alright, that will suffice, I think. Let me glue it in place again. Oh, forgot the back. I forgot the back, so. So now the only thing we need to do is finish the radiator here, and for that the same thing, we're going to use a little bit of raw umber and just barely touch the detail on there. You just want to make sure you don't damage the layer of metal. Just barely go around it, touch it here and there. And then the very last thing you want to do, and that's up to you, but I'm going to do a little bit of it, is to get some pigments. In this case, I'm using the burnt umber pigments because it matches closely of the colors I've been using. And I'm going to dust it here and there just to take the sharpness out of the equation. Again, it might be good to put this on a little bit of a card, just so you can control it a little bit better. Just need a little bit. That should be enough. And then just dust it here and there, just to break the contrast, to make it a little bit dusty and a little bit. It blends in everything. It blends in the black of the tires. It blends in the rock. Don't overdo it though, but just here and there. You just put some dust on there. Same thing on this side. Maybe you can do it here and there where there's a lot of dirt, like a lot of residue. You can accentuate that and create some dust, or in between the planks, left and right. Just be careful, don't overdo it. Okay, now we're done with that. And if you really want to make it more realistic than this, you might add some oil spots. And we're gonna go back. I'm gonna go with the smoke, the Uptilon 502 smoke color oil paint. Spritz a little bit on here. And again, we're gonna thin this and then just simulate some oil spots. Doesn't matter where you do it, that's up to you. Just make some dark. Make sure it's very, very thin, and then you just add it here and there. Make sure that the bottom layer is very thin, and then you can add some more in the middle, and it will blend into each other, and you go from dark to light. Look at pictures, look at oil spots, and try to recreate these. Don't overdo it, just maybe 2 or 3 on the whole airfield. That's good enough. And if you really want to get into the detail, you can also make some tire marks. Again, you do that with the smoke or black. Wipe it off again. Just make some streaks in the same direction. Don't overdo it. And just make sure you make at least 2, because you want them. Airplane has 2 wheels actually, so. And try to simulate that. You can even do one from the side going that way, and they can cross. So I'm going to leave it at that. That's it. Now the next thing I'm going to do, and do not use a dull coat on the whole thing, but I would advise, if the oil's on the planks, only on the planks and on the propeller, if that is a little bit glossy, to get a real effect, you should put a little bit of a dull coat on there. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then that should be it. So for this I use the polyurethane matte varnish from Vallejo. It's one of the best out there. A little bit in a cup here. A little bit of airbrush there. Now it might look a little milky, but don't worry about it. It will all disappear. And like I said, make sure you only stay on the planks. That's the only you want to reach, and the propeller. Turn this a little. And that's basically it. There you go. All done. Time-wise, If I would have done it in one continuous session, it probably would have taken me maybe an hour and a half maybe. But again, once you put your airplane on there, it brings everything to life. It brings to life the airplane, and it brings the diorama to life. So those two combined, it's a perfect match. It's all nice and done, and as you can see, there's not a lot of work to it. It's pretty rewarding, and once you put your airplane on there, it all comes together. It pops out, it's exactly what you want, and it brings the airplane to life. It brings the airplane to life and also the base. If you look for something special, make it a conversation piece, this is the way to go. So guys, as you have been watching, it's very easy to do. It doesn't take much to paint it, and it really brings your airplane to life. Once you put the two together, it's just fabulous. At the beginning of the video, I told you that we're going to do several throughout the year. Next time we plan to paint the Marston Mat, which is the World War II Korea/Vietnam era. But for now, that was it. I hope you enjoyed it. Jef V here, signing off. If you like what we have to say and you want to see more of this, please subscribe to Squadron TV or make your friends subscribe, or even your puppy. You can also follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. How about that? How about them apple?